Please note that this documentary contains excerpts of copyrighted music which are used under the fair use policy for educational and commentary purposes. Additionally, I'd like to mention that I am just a fan of Italian horror films, not an expert, so if you have any thoughts, insights, or corrections, please feel free to share them with us. You can comment on our Spotify, ACAST, or YouTube channels, or you can find us by typing Matt and Mike Pull Focus or Matthew Fajani Sound Designer. I'd like to thank all my guests that took part in this documentary. It was a dream come true to speak to these people. Also, a huge thank you to Mark Brown for his fantastic artwork and my brother David for helping me edit. Enjoy.
Are you the type that likes to watch a scary movie? How would you like to actually be in one? Get ready to scream. Scream, rated R restricted from Dimension Home Video, coming soon to Blockbuster.
In the mid-90s, my best friend and I would insist on being driven to our local Blockbuster video store to rent the latest family-friendly film on good old VHS tape. We would grab the latest Arnold Schwarzenegger or Bond action movie from the new releases shelf on the back wall, if they had any copies left on a frenzied Friday night. However, this was not the main purpose of our visit. We were there to covet the items much more forbidden and potentially dangerous. No, not the £9 tubs of Häagen-Dazs ice cream, but the forbidden films of the horror section. Sitting on a shelf running parallel to the outer walls were VHS boxes sporting some of the most mesmerizingly obscene artwork imaginable to our young impressionable minds. Adam Simon's Brain Dead, Clive Barker's Hellraiser, and Abel Ferreira's Driller Killer, to name but a few. We would stand there ogling these sickly grotesque but wonderfully imaginative boxes with no idea how anyone could even withstand the horrors within if viewed in the comfort of their own home. The huge blood-red 18 stamp that adorned all of the more extreme movies on the shelf was, to us, like a seal of ultimate quality. Renting a horror film with a 15 certificate stamp felt like somehow purchasing an inferior product. These were magical times of discovery. I remember standing there one evening, fixating on an image of a man's blooded brains after seemingly having the top of his skull surgically removed on the back of the Brain Dead VHS box, and thinking to myself, surely nobody should be allowed to watch these movies. I could talk endlessly about all the great horror titles that adorn the Blockbuster shelves, most of which I was still yet to see. Each one called out to us, silently beckoning but warning at the same time. But there was one cover that always stood out to me. Lucio Fulci's Zombie Flesh Eaters. The cover sported the chilling tagline, "When the earth spits out the dead, they will return to tear the flesh of the living." I didn't know it then, but this play on "When there is no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth," from Romero's Citizen Kane of zombie movies Dawn of the Dead, 1978, known in the Italian market as Zombie, was my first clue into how these movies were marketed and what previous masters they were trying to emulate. I had no idea about film censorship or the video nasty scare of the 1980s. Little did I know that this one glorious film, with its frightening and absurdly graphic box art, would open the doors not just to the most graphically violent films I would ever see, but also to what I firmly believe, some of the most important and influential horror movies ever made.
Much later.
I was now in my early teens and had lost sleep in fear over nearly all the horror classics available on home video at that time. These included Ridley Scott's Alien, John Landis's An American Werewolf in London, and of course, William Friedkin's The Exorcist, which, unbelievably, was only cleared for release on VHS in November of 1998. All groundbreaking motion pictures in their own brilliant ways, each had shaped the nightmares of millions for decades. I'd even begun to prematurely watch horror films at the cinema, sneaking into films like Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow and John DeBont's The Haunting. Like my dad, I have the collector's gene and began to amass a small collection from the Vipco Vaults of Horror VHS series. Vipco, short for Video Instant Picture Company, was a British home video distribution company founded by Michael Lee in the late 70s. It became well known for distributing horror and exploitation films, particularly during the Video Nasties era in the UK. Vipco gained a reputation for releasing uncut versions of controversial films, which often led to legal challenges and censorship issues. It was a strange time where HMV and Virgin megastores still stocked the VHS tapes right next to the newly emerging DVD format. Despite the new technology, I still opted to buy the Vipco VHS copies, so my first collection of Italian zombie greats and Video Nasty classics were already obsolete before I had bought them. My first collection stood about 12 VHS tapes strong, with such titles as Zombie Flesh Eaters 1, 2 and 3, naturally, Zombies Creeping Flesh, aka Hell of the Living Dead, and the most infamous and nasty of them all, Cannibal Holocaust. Whilst technically not a zombie movie, and in fact a cannibal movie set in the Amazon rainforest, it would be an oversight not to include it here, as the film shares many of the same uncanny aesthetics as the so-called spaghetti zombie movies of the 1970s and 1980s. Namely badly dubbed dialogue, exotic filming locations, and plenty of gore. Seeing these movies for the first time, they certainly did not disappoint, fully living up to their infamous reputations and alarming box art. Cannibal Holocaust in particular caused me and my friend to postpone our initial viewing because the Ritz Ortolani fantastically whimsical score over the opening titles so jarred with our expectations, we felt physically ill and could not continue. I was born into the closest thing the zombie genre ever had to a wilderness period. In making this documentary, my aim is not to review or critique, but to celebrate and highlight what I believe is a fascinating period for genre cinema. This unique and often overlooked subgenre of Italian horror cinema that emerged in the 1970s and the 1980s would leave an indelible footprint on future zombie fiction and help create the style and form of the zombie in all pop culture. I'll explore the historical roots of these films, their distinctive visual and narrative style, and the ways they have shaped modern horror and pop culture. From their gritty atmosphere to their unforgettable special effects, these movies have a lot to answer for. Like all movie genres, it is difficult to say exactly where its true origins lie, but I believe the spaghetti zombie film's roots can be traced back to three main genres that predated them. Firstly, and purely for their namesake, the spaghetti westerns of the 1960s and 1970s. The films of Sergio Leone and Bruno Mattei, who would much later take over directing duties from Fulci on The Troubleshoot for Zombie 3 in 1988, conjure up images of tumbleweeds rolling through sun-baked deserts, gun-toting cowboys, and are essentially morality tales set to the backdrop of iconic scores. However, despite sharing their namesake, some incredibly stylish cinematography, and their Italian production teams, the spaghetti zombie film is a completely different beast in almost every way. Secondly, and probably the biggest influence stylistically, the giallo films of the 1960s. Giallo, meaning yellow in Italian, refers to a genre of mystery horror films categorized by stylish cinematography, psychological elements, and a focus on violence and eroticism. Pioneered by directors like Dario Argento and Mario Bava, giallo films created a rich aesthetic that would inform the visual storytelling of later horror films, including zombie epics. Incidentally, the great and most well-known giallo director Dario Argento, director of the iconic Suspiria, co-wrote the story for Leone's iconic Once Upon a Time in the West and was actually present during principal photography in Granada, Spain. The giallo genre's penchant for excessive gore, elaborate murder sequences and shocking reveals laid a foundation for Italian filmmakers to explore even more extreme forms of horror. This ethos seamlessly transitioned into the realm of the undead as directors sought to capitalize on the visceral appeal of the zombie mythos. The third and most fundamental influence to Italian zombie cinema can be traced back to a small, low-budget independent movie made by a fledgling group of filmmakers from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, who called themselves Image 10.
Welcome to a night of total terror. Night of the living dead.
After only a few years of producing modestly successful TV adverts for Calgon, and even a segment for Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, in which Fred Rogers underwent a tonsillectomy, these 10 friends threw together $1,000 each to fund a feature that would change horror films forever. This was the legendary Night of the Living Dead, written and directed by the head of Image 10, George A. Romero. George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead, 1968, not only revolutionized the zombie genre, but introduced themes of societal collapse, racial tension, and existential dread. These motifs resonated with Italian filmmakers, providing fertile ground upon which to build their own narratives. Having a black leading actor whose race was never part of the plot was bold and revolutionary in 1968's American cinema. Then to have him callously shot dead by a band of rednecks at the film's conclusion was downright incendiary. Romero tells the story of the moment that they heard of Martin Luther King's assassination on his car radio. He and producer John Russo just happened to be driving the first finished print of the movie to sell to distributors in LA. It was at this very moment that we truly realized what we had, said Romero. I would argue that the vast majority of Italian spaghetti zombie movies take little more from Romero's Dead saga than the fundamental rules of the zombie creature itself. They eat human flesh, they move slow, and you kill them by removing the head or destroying the brain. In Romero movies, the zombies are impressive to behold, especially in the third installment of the trilogy, The Dark and Claustrophobic Day of the Dead, released in 1985. However, as British film critic Barry Norman put it, the zombies in Dawn of the Dead are almost forgotten. His point was that the creatures could really be any natural disaster that brings about the collapse of civil society. What was key to the success of Dawn of the Dead was its very overt critique of consumer culture that reached fever pitch in the mid-1970s with the introduction of The Shopping Mall and its effect on the judgment of the film's ensemble characters. It is hard to believe that this staple of Western society that we all take for granted was a brand new phenomenon when Dawn of the Dead was filmed in the freezing winter of 1977. I spoke to Scott Reiniger about his experience working on what is now widely regarded as the greatest zombie movie of all time.
Romero had an influence on people you would never imagine. I had this script, I read the script, I said, this is the most bloody fucking thing I've ever read in my entire life. And it's just, people are gonna hate it. Yeah. But I looked at the character and I saw the arc of the character. And that was really interesting to me.
Did you see the whole script when you did the audition, or did you just get sides?
Oh, you mean all 247 pages?
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw the whole script.
Yeah.
And I went, oh my God, nobody's going to come watch this movie.
Yeah, yeah. Didn't have high hopes.
Well, it was so bloody, it was so violent.
Yeah.
But you don't get George's humor in the script. You don't get his, social satire. Then you start to watch it and go, oh, I see what's going on here.
This is about something else.
Yeah, there's other level to this whole movie.
Yeah. We had a film critic here called Barry Norman, who was kind of like our Leonard Maltin, I guess, in the UK. And we had a book of the 100 greatest movies or whatever. And it had little reviews of each of them. And I remember specifically my dad reading me the Dawn of the Dead review because I was very curious to see
really?
it. And it said that first of all, it said the Citizen Kane of zombie movies. So I liked that. I thought that was great. But it also said that the zombies are secondary and almost forgotten in this movie. And when I watched it for the first time, I kind of realized that. I thought, in that lull, when you guys are safe and secure in the mall, the zombies, you don't see them for a good 15 minutes, and it's all about the character development and
their relationships.
100%. And that's what I think resonates with people the most.
It's great that you say that because at the last convention I was at, question I've always thought about, I asked the audience afterwards, I said, what is it about this film that lingers with you? Why? What is it, apart from the gore and the obvious horror, what is it about it? And their answers were fascinating to me. And they all started to come very alive and outspoken. Like, oh, yeah. And I went, wow, and because I thought you got to ask these people, what is it about this movie that so hooks you?
Yeah.
And it was pretty incredible. I was kind of in awe, frankly.
Yeah, by the variety of answers that you got.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's obviously the consumerism metaphors and things like that, which are kind of written about and stuff. But the relationship between you and Ken's character, I think is so palpable in that movie. And as I said, when the bite comes and when your doom is spelt, it really affected like the audience that I was watching it with, because I think that you think in the apocalypse, if you find a buddy, you know, that you get on with, you're completely on the same page, and then if he goes or she goes, whoever it is, that's the end. It's not just the end of your safety and like, you know, that you're this you know, peaceful habitat you've got here, but it's also he's like the last person that you had a true connection with.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny because you don't think about that when you're making the movie.
No.
I mean, it's so in retrospect, you know, and it's like, it's been so awesome, you know, that people still follow the movie. I am still in awe about that.
Yeah.
It's like,
these were the first zombie movies that I was introduced to, like the Romero universe, you know, Dawn, Day, Night of the Living Dead. But, you know, after I'd sort of, you know, watched these movies over and over and really got to love them, I realized that, you know, there was a whole Italian school of zombie movies that I hadn't really looked into.
Yes.
And this is what I'm kind of fascinated by is like, and a big question I wanted to ask you was, like, at the time you were making this movie, were you and Romero and the producers kind of aware of the Italian market, you know, the Lucio Fulcis?
Only aware of it because of Dario D'Argento, you know, who was a collaborator on Dawn, you know, from a producing point of view.
Right, yeah.
I was aware of there was Italian horror, but no, not intimately, no. He didn't follow anybody else. He just did what he did, and whether you like it or not, he wasn't arrogant about that.
No.
He was just a big pussycat.
Yeah. He wasn't competitive either. He wasn't this guy. No, none of that.
No, the things he disliked about things, he was very vocal about it, but no, he just would make the movies he wanted to make, and you like it or you don't. Tough.
Yeah. Did you have a cameo in the remake of Dawn?
I did. I played a National Guard general who's lying to the media.
Yes.
Telling him everything's gonna be okay, we're in control, and what I was saying was all bullshit. Zack Snyder was a really great guy. He was funny, relaxed, and so was the producer, Eric Newman. You know what Eric said to me? He said, since he was 16 years old, he said, I always wanted to remake that movie. They were so nice. Oh, my God.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because I'm glad that they had an appreciation for you, and obviously Ken had a cameo as well.
Tom Savini did.
Tom Savini, yes. So it's great that they had a respect for the source material, you know, that they reached out to you guys.
You know what Eric Newman said? He said to me, and he was sincere. He said, you know, I don't want to insult George.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah.
As previously stated, it is difficult to choose a definitive start to the spaghetti zombie movement, but it is clear that after the success of Night of the Living Dead in the States, a lucrative market for these types of dystopian zombie stories was growing around the world. With that in mind, I think we'll start with a film that is particularly close to my heart, as it was set and partially filmed in my hometown. George Grau's 1974 zombie mystery thriller, Let Sleeping Corpses Lie, aka Don't Open the Window, aka the direct Spanish title translation, Do Not Profane the Sleep of the Dead, but best known to the UK and US audiences as The Living Dead at the Manchester Morgue. The Living Dead at the Manchester Morgue stands out as a seminal entry in the zombie genre, melding Spanish and Italian cinematic sensibilities with a distinctly British backdrop. One of the most commendable aspects of the film is its setting, effectively employing the contrasting landscapes of Castleton and Dark Ages Manchester. The rural locations evoke a sense of isolation, which heightens the impact of the undead's emergence. This juxtaposition evokes a sense of place that effectively draws the viewer into the darker aspects of human existence and ecological irresponsibility. The choice of these specific locales enriches the narrative, suggesting that horror can permeate even the most serene environments. Grau's choice of these settings reflects the film's thematic concerns about societal decay and the encroachment of technology, embodied by the experimental agricultural methods that inadvertently awaken the dead. Grau's direction is noticeable for its atmospheric tension and innovative use of special makeup effects, which mark a high point for zombie representation. The makeup team, led by Gennetto De Rossi, delivers a visceral realism that was groundbreaking for its time. The transformation of live actors into decaying corpses is executed with such meticulous attention to detail that it serves to both horrify and fascinate the audience. This not only enhances the film's supernatural elements, but also invites the viewers to grapple with the implications of death and decay, reflecting themes of mortality and the human condition. Narratively, the film operates on multiple levels, While it presents a straightforward horror plot filled with suspense and grotesque imagery, it simultaneously critiques the culture and ecological crises of the 1970s. The film's protagonists, George and Edna, are unwittingly embroiled in a conflict that symbolises the struggle between progress and preservation. Their fight against the undead becomes an allegory for humans' mismanagement of nature, a theme that resonates powerfully in contemporary discourse around climate change and sustainability. The Living Dead at the Manchester Morgue is far more than a mere horror film. It serves as an astute critique of social apathy towards technological advancement and environmental degradation, whilst pushing the envelope of visual effects. Grauer's masterful integration of setting, thematic depth, and groundbreaking zombie makeup elevate this film to a classic within the genre. I remember my brother reading from a late 90s edition of Empire magazine and informing me with interest that there was an old cult zombie movie lost to time entitled The Living Dead at the Manchester Morgue. I can remember exactly where I was when he told me this, so strong is the memory. However, in that pre-internet age, it never occurred to me that I'd ever be able to one day see this movie, let alone to have the opportunity to talk to all-round Italian film scholar Eugenio Ercolani about the film's production and its lasting impact.
That film specifically, that film is mostly Spanish. I mean, the Italian quota was fairly small in that film. In fact, as far as Italian crew members, there's Giuliano Sorgini, who's the composer. Gianetto De Rossi was makeup effects. Ray Lovelock was part of the Italian quota. And that's pretty much it. I mean, there are probably another couple of names. Yeah, the whole Spanish-Italian kind of collaboration, which is especially strong in westerns, although of course, you know, in Gialli, for example, there are quite a few. However, keep in mind that, which is one of the reasons it was not shot in Spain, that film, is that, you know, up until what is it, 1976, 77? I'm going completely by memory here, but anyway, second half of the 70s, Spain was very much under the grip of Generalissimo Franco, the Franco dictatorship. So it was a fairly poor country, Spain, whereas Italy by the mid-1950s went through a massive economic boom. So Italy was, I believe, up until the early 70s, definitely late 1960s, I think it was one of the richest countries in Europe. Gialli were much more successful in Italy because they were more rooted in reality. Although even there we see Dario Argento kind of changing things, not creating a subgenre. In fact, I think there's some wonderful examples within Gialli from the 1960s. I mean, we can look at Bava, we can look at Lenzi, Romolo Guerrieri, but Dario Argento brought the genre to Italy, kind of immersed it even more in Italian culture. In the same way, Leone kind of, while looking at American, the American narrative structure, kind of immersed it in Italian culture in a way. So, kind of liberating it from the preconceived tropes of American cinema. So horror was never really successful. Most of, for example, Fulci's films did a lot more money elsewhere. Genre films tell the DNA of a country. The tropes, the customs, the mores, the trends, how stuff changes, sexual liberation, the politics, the music, the pop references. I mean, you can find everything. It becomes a blueprint of a country's evolution or involution, or, well, without giving it a positive or negative connotation, let's say, of the changes of a country. So that, in that sense, it's extremely fascinating because there's so much more than just the entertainment which is played in front of our eyes.
Apart from Manchester Morgue and Armando Dias-Soro's Spanish-Portuguese horror titles known as the Blind Dead series, first of which was released in 1972, the zombie genre lay more or less dormant for a further 5 years, until the release of the seasoned Italian director Lucio Fulci's Zombie 2, or its more inflammatory European title, Zombie Flesh Eaters. If Romero's Dawn of the Dead is the Citizen Kane of American zombie movies, then Zombie Flesh Eaters is the La Dolce Vita of the Italian school. The film serves as a sequel, in name only, to the 1978 Zombie, the Italian name for Romero's Dawn of the Dead. However, Zombie 2 is an entirely different beast. When a leaderless sailing yacht in New York Harbor releases its slightly overweight undead cargo into the city, reporter Peter West becomes aware of the story. The yacht belongs to the missing father of Ann Bowles, who goes on a search together with the journalist. The trail leads to the Caribbean island of Motul, where the elusive Dr. Maynard lives and works with his wife Paula. The sound of voodoo drums can be heard in the distance, while the dead rise from their graves and hunt down the living. The film's brief prologue has to be one of the most shocking in cinema history. Fulci doesn't make the audience wait long for just a small taste of what's to come. Here we see Gennetto de Rossi's incredible practical effects work in all its glory.
The boat can leave now. Tell the crew.
After a brief credit sequence in which we hear Fabio Frizzi's extraordinary minimalist synth score, the sound of crashing waves begins to replace the music, and the light returns to shine upon, of all things, the Twin Towers, as an abandoned yacht drifts past them, heading for the shore. I've always loved this opening, as I feel whether intentionally or not, the abandoned yacht carrying its deadly cargo on a crash course for New York's business district can't help but feel like Fulci and the Italians' metaphorical invasion of American horror markets. The harbour patrol boards the boat and quickly discovers its grisly occupant. Incidentally, this very memorable zombie is played by professional dog trainer and part-time actor Arthur Haggerty, better known as Captain Haggerty. Born in the Bronx in the 1930s, he was a pioneer in the field of dog training, a discipline his daughter still carries on today. This atrocity leads to reporter Peter West, Ian McCulloch, and Ann Bowles, Teaser Farrow, the daughter of the yacht's owner, on a harrowing investigation into her father's mysterious disappearance on Motul, a Caribbean island afflicted by voodoo curses and reanimated corpses. Her father is Dr. Maynard, played by Richard Johnson, who runs the island's hospital. One thing that sets this film apart from its inevitable sequels and follow-ups is the calibre of its cast. Not only do we have Teaser Farrow, established American actor and sister of Mia Farrow, we also have veteran British stage and screen actors Ian McCulloch and Richard Johnson. Yes, the Richard Johnson from The Haunting. Doctor Who fans may also recognise Ian McCulloch from his turn as iconic villain Nielsen in 3 episodes that aired in 1984. Peter and Anne travel to the Caribbean in search of answers. In the Antilles, they hitch a ride on a boat with 2 vacationers, Brian Hall, played by Al Cliver, and his girlfriend Susan Barrett, played by Arita Gay. On their journey to Motul, they stop the boat to allow Susan to take some underwater snaps. And thank God they do. Because what transpires is one of the most extraordinary, iconic, and unexpected moments in horror cinema history. At first, you'd be forgiven for thinking that this scene is here simply to appeal to the B-movie sexploitation market for the film, and you may be right. Producers of such films would often insist on unnecessary nudity as a deal-breaker when financing films. However, whatever its purpose or intention, I feel that this seemingly superfluous set-piece serves to lull the audience into a false sense of undead-free security. Susan quickly realises that she's been hunted by a great white shark. She shouts for help, but it's when she finds cover that the truly unexpected happens. This jump scare is just the beginning, as our submerged zombie, played by Mexican underwater cameraman Ramon Bravo, gets attacked by the shark. After taking a bite out of it, the shark bites back, nearly severing the zombie's arm. The shark in the film is a real shark. The filmmakers used a mixture of real shark footage, practical effects, and some underwater dummies to create the illusion of the fight. The actual underwater footage was shot by a skilled Italian underwater cameraman named Sergio Salvati. Salvati was a long-time collaborator with Fulci and had experience filming underwater scenes. It's important to remember that this film was shot only 3 short years after the release of Steven Spielberg's box office phenomenon Jaws, so shark attack fears were very much in the public consciousness. I think this scene is important to the overall impact of the film, not just because it's a technical marvel that it was able to be captured on film at all, but also because it subconsciously fuels the audience's internal terror. Specifically, if one of these zombies can hold its own against a great white shark, what chances do our heroes stand against the army that they still stand to face on Motul? In probably the most infamous scene in the movie, actress Ola Kalatos, who plays the character of Paula Maynard, meets a gruesome fate in her remote island villa. She is the wife of Dr. Maynard, who has heard rumours of these undead ghouls and believes that they should leave the island as soon as possible. As she is alone at night, a zombie begins to break through the wooden door of her bedroom. Paula tries to hold it shut, but the zombie's decaying hand smashes through and grabs her hair, slowly dragging her face towards a sharp, splintered piece of wood jutting out from the broken door. The scene is drawn out with unbearable tension, and it is filmed in extreme close-up. In a moment of pure shock horror, the wooden splinter is shown impaling her eye in explicit detail, a hallmark of director Lucio Fulci's brutal, visceral style, and also the extraordinary skills of makeup artist Gianetto De Rossi. I'll challenge the most die-hard horror film fans to endure this scene without flinching. Her pitched-down screams are a fantastic, grisly detail, perhaps suggesting that she is well on her way to becoming something else. After Paula's gruesome death in the infamous Splinter scene, focus shifts back to our heroes. As they arrive on the island and continue their search for answers, they meet Dr. Maynard, who is visibly worn down by the horrors he's witnessed. Despite his scientific approach, even he seems to be losing faith as the dead continue to claw their way out of the grave, their numbers growing. After our heroes discover Paula's body and lose their ride, they make their way back to Dr. Maynard through the centre of the island. Ancient corpses begin erupting from jungle graves in a haunting sequence, dripping with atmosphere and decay. The makeup effects by Gianetto De Rossi shine here, especially as dirt-caked conquistador zombies claw their way out of the earth in slow, agonizing motion. This is where Susan meets her unfortunate end, by the zombie played by stunt coordinator Ottaviano Dell'Acqua, unknown to the world as Mr. Maggots. The action reaches its peak at the makeshift hospital, where Dr. Maynard and a few remaining staff have set up a last line of defense. This scene is pure siege horror, boarded windows, flickering lanterns, and the groans of the undead growing louder by the second. As the zombies close in on the hospital, our heroes arm themselves with rifles and Molotov cocktails. The tension is relentless as the survivors try to keep the creatures out, but one by one, the barricades begin to fall. Dr. Maynard, in a cruel twist of fate, is bitten by the reanimated corpse of his friend Fritz, and the hospital is soon overrun in a chaotic battle of gunfire and flames. The zombies, nearly unstoppable, crash through the doors and windows, picking off the survivors. It is a brutal, drawn-out massacre soaked in Fulci's signature gore, throats ripped out, flesh torn, and relentless carnage. I believe second only to the final showdown in Romero's Day of the Dead, a very close second. Peter, Anne, and Brian narrowly escape the burning building, barely fending off the undead with their weapons as they retreat to the boat. Brian, unfortunately, encounters the reanimated corpse of his girlfriend Susan. With the island consumed by death, Peter, Anne, and Brian sail away, believing they have survived the worst. But in classic horror fashion, the film ends with one final apocalyptic twist. A radio broadcast reports that chaos has erupted in New York City. Zombies are now in the streets. The film's final image is chilling, a procession of the undead shambling across Brooklyn Bridge, confirming that the nightmare has spread beyond Motul, and there may be no stopping it. The filming locations utilised in Zombie Flesh Eaters serve as a critical point of comparison to its American counterparts. Shot primarily on the exotic shores of the Dominican Republic, specifically the Bahamas, the film capitalises on the juxtaposition of a tranquil beauty against horrifying occurrences. Voodoo plays an integral role in shaping the film's thematic landscape, drawing from folkloric traditions associated with the fear of the unknown. In Zombie Flesh Eaters, the portrayal of the undead is intertwined with Haitian voodoo mythology, positioning zombies as products of dark rituals rather than mere flesh-eating monsters. This element is rather vague, and certainly not seen in the film itself. The doctor's assistant Marcus mentions that the villagers that have gone inland are...
They're making voodoo, I think.
And there is an unsettling scene where our hero stopped to listen to the distant chants of what could possibly be the island's indigenous population, putting a curse on the invaders and causing the dead to rise.
Haiti, land of the voodoo.
It would also be remiss not to mention what are regarded as the first zombie movies. White Zombie, 1932, is considered the first feature-length zombie film. Directed by Victor Halperin and starring Bela Lugosi as the menacing Murder Londra, the film was produced independently in Los Angeles, using recycled sets from Dracula and Frankenstein. The plot centers on a young woman in Haiti who is transformed into a zombie through voodoo rituals so she can be controlled by others. Drawing from early 20th century pulp fiction, the film reflects on a Western fascination with Haitian culture, but presents it through a lens of exoticism, fear, and misinformation. The film's portrayal of voodoo is steeped in xenophobia and racism, depicting Haitian religious practices as dark, mysterious, and dangerous. Black characters are largely voiceless background figures, reinforcing colonial ideas of white dominance and foreign threat. The zombie in this film is not a flesh-eating monster, but rather a mindless servant, emphasizing fears of loss of agency and control in a, quote, primitive land. I Walked with a Zombie, 1943, directed by Jacques Turner and produced by Val Lewton for RKO Pictures, takes a more atmospheric and poetic approach. Loosely inspired by Jane Eyre, the film follows a Canadian nurse who travels to a Caribbean island to take care of the wife of a plantation owner, only to uncover the island's deep connection to voodoo. Though more stylized and ambiguous than White Zombie, this film also leans into colonial stereotypes. Despite a more respectful tone and haunting visuals, I Walked with a Zombie still reflects the racial attitudes of its time. The Caribbean setting is portrayed as a place of mystery and superstition, with black characters often depicted as passive carriers of ancient irrational beliefs. The film uses voodoo more as an aesthetic and narrative device than a serious cultural representation, reinforcing the idea of the Caribbean as an exotic and eerie other. Both films illustrate how early Hollywood horror often exoticized non-Western cultures, using them to evoke fear and fascination, whilst also perpetuating xenophobia. It is also important to note that Fulci would not be the last director to centre his film around such themes.
From Wes Craven, director of A Nightmare on Elm Street.
The Serpent and the Rainbow, 1988, loosely based on a non-fiction book by ethnobotanist Wade Davis, is a horror film directed by Wes Craven and starring Bill Pullman as an anthropologist named Dennis Allen. The story follows Dennis as he travels to Haiti to investigate a mysterious drug used in voodoo rituals that allegedly turns people into zombies. Blending supernatural horror with political unrest, the film explores themes of voodoo, mysticism, and the clash between science and spirituality. As Dennis delves deeper, he encounters terrifying rituals, dark magic, and government corruption. In Zombie Flesh Eaters, despite the voodoo themes being vague and underexplored, I think they add to the sense of threat, uncertainty, and ultimately fear of the creatures themselves. This extraordinary film spawned several unofficial and loosely connected sequels. The first of these, Zombie 3, 1988, or Zombie Flesh Eaters 2, was originally helmed by Fulci, but he had to leave the project midway due to some serious health issues. Bruno Mattei and Claudio Fagrasso stepped in to complete the film, which shifted the tone towards fast-paced action and chaos, featuring a military virus that unleashes a zombie outbreak in the Philippines. Zombie 4 After Death, 1989, directed by Fagrasso, follows a woman returning to a remote island where voodoo rituals have once again awakened the dead. It's a low-budget, gore-heavy film with very little connection to its predecessors beyond the zombie theme. Zombie 5 The Killing Birds, 1987, directed by Claudio Lattanzi with some involvement from Joe D'Amato, barely qualifies as a zombie film, It leans more towards supernatural horror, focusing on a group of students encountering strange forces in an abandoned house. Some of you may have noticed that the dates don't quite add up, Zombie 5 being released before Zombie 4. In reality, Zombie 4 was released as simply After Death in 1989, and only posthumously got its Zombie 4 title. I spoke to actress Beatrice Ring about her experience filming Zombie 3 with Fulci in the intense heat of the Philippines.
What I didn't realize is that our movie shot in the very far, deep jungle, 2.5 hours away from Manila, in the middle of nowhere. So there was literally nothing to eat. There was no water. We only had sodas on the set. And it was the weather, I think, I don't know in Celsius, but I think in Fahrenheit, it was at least, it started at 115, like at 9 in the morning.
Wow.
So you woke up already drenched in sweat, but we were on set 10 to 12 hours a day. So that work was intense. So Lucio Fulci got very sick on the set, so they decided to go back and shoot scene, but none of the actors wanted to go back.
Well, you tell me about this. So, like, you know, we have a very loose story that, you know, people say that Fulci left the project and then there was two, you know, so it had 3 directors, this movie. That's what people say. But, like, you know, from your perspective, this was a Lucio Fulci film from the beginning, and then all this happened afterwards?
I only heard about what happened later after the film was released because they asked me to go back to the Philippines, and I say not on my dead body. And then they shot other scenes, and then when we saw the movies, we were like, oh, what is all this? But so because we had a script originally with what we worked in the Philippines, and so the movies got released with additional stories in the opening scenes. And I think they added an extra 20 minutes, which is quite a lot. I just wanted to say that Lucio Fulci was very, very sick on the set. He had a very large protruded stomach. And I think you've seen a lot of funny. He had a very strong sense of irony. He used to smoke and never tap on his cigarettes. So he had these very long ashes on his cigarettes while he talked. And the ashes would drop on his sweater or jacket. So he had these like pieces of ashes sitting there while he was talking. And it was part of like, is he losing it? Is he being funny? Is he being a character? Or is he like completely exhausted? He can't even shake the cigarette anymore. It just like you kind of left it to itself. Because when he was on the set in the Philippines, once a week, he had to drive to Manila. And they say that they had to extract water from this or something from his stomach. And his stomach was very, very big. And he used to, when we had dinner, he used to make fun of this giant belly. And he would ask everybody to touch it. And he was like, this is like, I'm pregnant. And he was like, go ahead, touch it, Bia, come on, touch it, put your hands here, And he, you know, it was like, okay. But we were in our 20s, so we were just, you know, like puppies. We were like just very gullible and innocent and just thinking about this is fun. And it's been really wonderful for me. I think I was invited to just one horror convention, and then I have this thing where I say too many things and people are like, let's not have her come back next year. I think I made a really good denunciation and reporting on the animal abuse that happened on the movie, which was horrendous. So I talked at length during, we had birds. I don't know if you remember, bird scenes where the birds were on the floor gasping. And they were injected with air. So I was on the set, and I was super young, and I didn't know how to really express myself, but we were horrified. We saw the special effect guy come with a syringe and just injecting all the birds with air. The birds were on the floor, literally comatose. I don't know what air does to your body, but they looked like they were in a lot of suffering. And so we had to do the scene with the car where we arrive, and I slammed my brakes, and I was very upset. I was very upset, but then you got 50 people around you saying, come on, let's go, let's move the car, and then the guy was doing this thing. So when I went to the convention, I had a huge room full of press and all the fans. God bless their heart. They came from all over the place. It was really very sweet listening to their stories coming. So I have really a special place in my heart for fans.
As we heard, Lucio Fulci's deteriorating health during Zombie 3 marked his last involvement with the series. He would go on to direct more feature films after this, including most notably his 1990 film A Cat in the Brain. Fulci stars as a fictionalized version of himself, a tortured horror filmmaker who was driven by violent visions that he experiences both behind the camera and off the set. Fulci sadly passed away in 1996, leaving behind a cult legacy in Italian horror. After the release of Zombie Flesh Eaters in 1979, Italian zombie cinema surged into a gory, surreal, and often unhinged new phase. Lucio Fulci's film, a tropical voodoo-tinged response to Romero's Dawn of the Dead, set the tone with its atmosphere of decay and unapologetic gore. What followed expanded and distorted that template in increasingly bizarre and memorable ways. Fulci's unofficial Gates of Hell trilogy marked a major shift for the director. City of the Living Dead in 1980, also known as The Gates of Hell, opens with a priest's suicide that causes the dead to rise, leading to an apocalyptic scenario filled with teleporting ghouls and shocking set pieces, including the infamous intestinal vomit scene. He followed it with The Beyond in 1981. A film now widely regarded as his masterpiece is a surreal dreamlike descent into a haunted hotel built on one of the 7 gates to hell. While zombies feature, they are more like harbingers of cosmic horror than traditional Romero or Fulci-style undead. The trilogy concludes with House by the Cemetery in 1981, blending gothic horror and zombie elements through the figure of Dr. Fraudstein, an undead surgeon who prolongs his life through grotesque experimentation. All 3 films emphasize atmosphere and dread over narrative coherence, pushing zombie cinema into something far more nightmarish and abstract. In more direct lineage from Zombie Flesh Eaters, Zombie Holocaust in 1980, directed by Marino Girolami, is notable for being shot in exactly the same tropical locations and starring Ian McCulloch, reprising essentially the same character type. The film blends the zombie and cannibal genres with wild abandon. Whilst less atmospheric than Fulci's work, it is packed with gore and exploitation flair, often feeling like a parallel universe remake of Zombie Flesh Eaters. Meanwhile, filmmakers like Andrea Bianchi and Bruno Mattei leaned heavily into the sleaze. Bianchi's Burial Ground in 1981 is notorious for its slow, rotting zombies and deeply disturbing subplot involving a child played by actor Peter Bark. By the late 80s, the genre was collapsing into self-parody. Zombie 3, 1988, started by Fulci and completed by Mattei and Claudio Fagrasso, features fast, machete-wielding zombies, erratic editing, and a virus-based plot, making for a fragmented but cult favourite mess. Zombie 4, After Death, 1989, pushes even further into absurdity, delivering voodoo rituals, machine guns, and breakneck pacing. An entertaining low-budget spectacle with little connection to any earlier works. Lamberto Bava's Demons, 1985, and Demons 2, 86, aren't traditional zombie films, but they share enough DNA, featuring rampant infection, siege scenarios, and extreme gore. These Argento-produced films are stylistic explosions of violence and heavy metal chaos set in a cursed movie theatre and later an apartment block. These movies bridge the gap between the humble zombie and truly demonic horror. Director Quentin Tarantino paid direct homage to this wave of Italian genre filmmaking in his World War II thriller, Inglourious Basterds, 2009. In one scene, Eli Roth's character uses an alias Antonio Margheriti, referencing the prolific Italian director of horror and action films like Cannibal Apocalypse. The film itself nods to Enzo G. Castellari's The Inglourious Basterds from 1978, with Castellari even appearing in a brief cameo in the movie. Tarantino's affection for Italian horror and exploitation cinema is clear, not just in the name drops, but in the gritty, stylized DNA that runs through all of his work. So, where does it stop? In my mind, this fantastically visceral period of horror cinema starts with a bang and ends with, well, Rupert Everett. Cemetery Man, also known as Della Morte Dell'Amore, 1994, directed by Michele Soavi, is a surreal, darkly romantic zombie film that blends horror, black comedy, and existential philosophy. It stars Rupert Everett as Francesco Della Morte, a delusional and emotionally detached caretaker of a cemetery in the small Italian town of Buffalora. His grim duty goes beyond burying the dead. Every night, he must re-kill the returners, corpses that inexplicably rise from their graves 7 days after burial. Della Morte lives in near isolation, with only his simple-minded assistant Nagi for company, a childlike man who communicates in grunts and develops a bizarre, tender relationship with the disembodied head of a young girl. Francesco, numb and drifting through life, seems indifferent to the violence he must perform nightly, treating it as a tedious job. That changes when a beautiful unnamed widow, played by Anna Fulci, enters his life. She is mourning her recently deceased husband, and the two share a strange and passionate affair, only for her to die, return, and die again in rapid succession. Della Morte keeps encountering different versions of the same woman, each also played by Fulci, suggesting a cycle of obsession, loss, and identity collapse. He begins to question the meaning of life, death, love, and whether the living are really any different from the dead. Throughout the film, Soavi mixes absurdity with melancholy. There's grotesque humour, zombie bikers, corrupt politicians, surreal bureaucratic indifference to death certificates, and moments of genuine poetic beauty and despair. The tone shifts constantly, perhaps echoing Francesco's mental unravelling. The film's climax is deliberately ambiguous. Francesco and Nagi appear to leave Buffalora only to discover that the world beyond the town doesn't exist, ending in a haunting image that suggests that the entire world may be an illusion, or that Francesco himself has been dead all along. As well as the aforementioned films, this movie reminded me tonally of Peter Jackson's absurd black comedy Brain Dead, released just 2 years earlier. His film contains similar scenes of extreme grotesque gags, but the theme is ultimately romantic and highly sentimental. In many ways, it is considered the last true spaghetti zombie film, a final poetic statement on a uniquely Italian subgenre that began with the raw brutality of Fulci's zombie flesh-eaters. Rather than ending with cheap gore or formulaic tropes, Cemetery Man closes the chapter with style, melancholy, and introspection. As such, it's often seen not just as a cult classic, but a fitting and artful conclusion to the golden era of Italian zombie cinema. Italian spaghetti zombie cinema, especially the work of Lucio Fulci, Umberto Lenzi, and Bruno Mattei, has left a lasting mark on modern horror across film, TV, and also video games. When Resident Evil was released in 1996, it instantly felt familiar to anyone who had grown up on Fulci's films. The mansion's claustrophobic halls, the moody lighting, and the emphasis on dread over action all echoed the Italian horror aesthetic. The zombies in Resident Evil moved with the same sluggish inevitability as Fulci's undead, appearing suddenly around corners, their grotesque faces and dripping wounds rendered in the best gore that the PlayStation could offer at the time. Even the game's pacing, slow, methodical and quiet, mirrored the creeping dread of a Fulci film, where the silence and stillness were just as terrifying as the violence. Then came Resident Evil 2 in 1998, which built on this foundation and expanded it. I spoke to Alyson Court about her casting as Claire Redfield in what is still my favourite game of the franchise.
I'm finally here.
Do the whole thing. Do the whole game. That'd be great. Alyson, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for your interest and for having me.
In terms of your love of movies, at this point, had you seen any zombie movies? Did you know George Romero's Dead trilogy or any of the Italian stuff, the Lucio Fulci movies? Or do you see any of that stuff?
Oh goodness, yes. I was a horror freak growing up. So once that I was aware of all that stuff, and once I saw the live action advertisement and the cutscenes and whatnot, I was like, wait a second, are you kidding me? This is incredible. So it was exciting, but after the fact. So when working on it, no clue. And then after it came out, I was really excited to be part of that.
Did you take any, going forward, doing Code Veronica and so on? Did you take any influence from the Italian side of zombie movies? I don't know if you'd seen like Zombie Flesh Eaters and let me think, The Beyond and all those kind of Fulci movies. Were you kind of aware of those films?
Yeah. Oh, very aware. But again, it wasn't something that was ever brought up during the recording, simply because the guys from Capcom Japan that came over for the recording studios. So Kamiya was there, Tom Shiraiwa and Eric Suzuki, they were all in the room. And then it was basically just a dialogue record script. It didn't have description. I didn't actually know that it was this zombie survival horror game. My contract would say Adventure Game 2.
Working title.
Yeah, exactly. So they were very protective. I had no idea. All I was told was this is the same recording coordinator for X-Men and our engineer and the studio. They were the same people who are now doing Resident Evil. And so our voice director had said, think Jubilee's slightly older sister, but serious. She's looking for her brother, but she doesn't understand what's going on. She's she's a fish out of water.
So there was no kind of direct, like, this is the universe that you're in, and there's zombies, and this is happening, and Leon is, over here. There was kind of no screen direction really at all. It was more just about the mood.
It was about the mood, and I think by keeping me sort of in the dark of what it was, it also allowed that came out in the character, because I'm like, what is this place?
Yeah.
What's going on? I don't like, this is weird.
You've just got like a blank space around you. You're just picturing the dark, and you're like, what's going on?
Yeah, you've got that tone in the voice naturally, and it seemed to work for the character and the situation. And it wasn't until the game was about to come out, and I was at a licensing convention, and I was there for Comfy Couch dressed as Lunette, and there was a PlayStation booth, like one over, but it was all cordoned off with all of these, protection slides and barriers, so you couldn't actually see in, but they were playing some clips from the game, and I heard myself screaming. I'm like, that's me. So I went waddling over in my clown costume and sort of worked my way through all of these, very serious Secret Service looking bro dudes in their suits talking about video games, and listened to it for a while. And eventually they all sort of look at me and be like, what are you doing? And I'm like, that's me. Okay, weird little clown girl. Bye.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah. No minors allowed in here.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
They all thought it was 12. It got back to Capcom Japan. They were like, what do you mean you hired some little clown girl? A few months later, we had to go back in for some pickups. And that's when I guess I had in the pickups, I had a better idea of what was going on.
Yeah, word had spread.
Because I got to see a couple of images for the models and stuff like that. And I got to chat with Paul Haddad, and we were both like, this is weird. Like, what are we working on? It's creepy, and I don't fully understand, but I guess it's got like these different scenarios, because that was the weirdest part of recording. It felt like we kept recording the same sections over and over and over again. And I was like, did I not survive a car crash and I'm stuck in this weird time loop? And it turns out it was just like one word would be slightly different, or the order of the sentences that you were conveying back and forth with either the audience or with the character in the scene just would be slightly tweaked, and it would be dependent on what had happened in Leon's scenario. Like if he didn't pick up that gun, then that gun would still be there for me to pick up. Or if he had picked it up, I would have to do something else in that situation. But otherwise the situation was exactly the same. So it took a long time for me to finally figure out, oh, there are these little changes.
Yeah.
So I wasn't used to that kind of interaction and scenario style for video games. I was used to Pac-Man.
Yeah, you're more Atari. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess you didn't know that because you were in. This was something that hadn't really been done before. And if I'm right, I don't think you ever say the word zombie in the game. I don't think that that's ever actually said, as far as I remember.
No, in the very beginning, when I'm like, "Don't shoot, I'm a human." Weird dialogue. And he's like, "Sorry there, babe." Does he not say, "I thought you were one of them zombie things"?
He does, yeah. So did you record that together, or?
No.
But yeah, you mean they are referred to as zombies in the game, yeah? Because I think it's in.
He says it.
I think famously in Night of the Living Dead, I don't think they're ever mentioned as zombies, or it might be. There's another movie. I should know this, but I'm pretty sure it's like one of the initial movies. They never say the word, and I think they call them ghouls or something. So like that word doesn't come until Dawn of the Dead, I think. Which leads me on, like you went on to obviously lend your voice to four more games and an animated movie. I think that's correct. You did Code Veronica.
So 5 games total and the movie. Yes.
Fulci's Zombie 3 features a striking image of zombies rising slowly from the water, an eerie, dreamlike moment that finds a clear echo in the House of the Dead arcade games. In those games, undead creatures frequently emerge from murky pools and flooded canals, mirroring Fulci's waterlogged revenants, capturing the same blend of tension and grotesque imagery. Unlike the more puzzle-based gameplay of Resident Evil, the House of the Dead arcade series took a more action-orientated approach. Echoing Nightmare City's chaotic energy, the zombies in House of the Dead didn't just shamble, they attacked with speed, aggression, and sometimes even weapons, very much mirroring the violent frenzy of Lenzi's Infected. Meanwhile, Lenzi's Nightmare City also introduced fast-paced, intelligent zombies. These frenzied attackers directly inspired the sprinting Infected of Danny Boyle's 28 Days Later, and the vicious undead in Zack Snyder's 2004 remake of Dawn of the Dead. Both films took Lenzi's chaotic high-speed horror and adapted it for modern audiences, redefining what a zombie threat could be. Little did Lenzi know back then that he would plant the seed that would start the biggest ongoing debate among zombie film fans. Does a true zombie walk or run? I believe the true strength of Italian zombie films lies in their aesthetics. While their storylines and set pieces can range wildly from the genuinely disturbing to the downright comical, it is this unique visual and atmospheric style that leaves the deepest impression. The lurid colour palettes, grotesque practical effects, surreal dreamlike sequences, and bold and often chaotic cinematography all work together to create a visceral experience that lingers long after the credits roll. These films don't just aim to scare, they aim to haunt, to unsettle, and most of all, to mesmerize. The impact they leave is not just emotional, but visual and psychological. I have yet to discover another subgenre of horror that has so thoroughly and powerfully embedded itself in my mind, shaping the way I see and appreciate horror cinema as a whole. Italian zombie films, for all their flaws and eccentricities, have carved out an aesthetic legacy that continues to inspire and disturb in equal measure.